Hey everybody, this is Donovan from Springfield Music, and I want to welcome you to Mo Better Bands, which is both a podcast and a YouTube channel where we talk with instrumental music educators in Missouri and Kansas about their programs, their successes, their challenges, and so much more. If there's a topic or an educator that you'd like to hear, drop me an email at donovan@springfieldmusic.com. That's DONOVAN at springfieldmusic.com. Okay, let's get to today's guest.
Our guest today is Keely Abeln, and she is in her third year as the director at Parkway South Middle School, where she teaches concert band and jazz band. Now, before teaching at Parkway, she spent the last 16 of her 23 years in the Francis Howe School District at Francis Howe Middle School. And one of the cool things that you'll see about Keely is that she really works hard to create activities in her classroom that go beyond just the traditional band rehearsal. She does a lot of things with like composing, conducting, and various community building events. And she works to create opportunities for students to discover a variety of aspects for making and loving music. I think you're going to really love this episode. Before we even started recording, you had some great ideas about things we should do. And one thing that you'd mentioned, which I think would be a great idea, I'm just going to put this out there to make sure that people here can think about it, is trying to find a way where directors can participate in some kind of ensemble, because you're right. It's so easy to spend all your time teaching, and then you kind of lose the whole reason of why you got into it in the first place. And so, do you yourself? What instrument do you play?
Horn.
The horn.
Gotcha. I play horn. So, and gotcha. I play in currently 2 brass quintets. So,
oh, awesome!
I don't play in a full band, but I do 2 brass quintets. I have another idea. I think we should have a band director band. And
a band director what?
A band director band.
Okay.
So one of the nights we have a rehearsal, and we're not doing it for the purpose of reading through new music. We're doing it for the purpose of remembering why we do this. Because as a middle school director, I spent a lot of time doing, don't get me wrong, great music with a purpose, but it's not what we fell in love with.
Yeah.
Why we do this. We're not playing Granger. We're,
yeah.
There's Keely. Keely doesn't take a step in my room normally, like maybe one year I got to, but that's normally not what I get to do. So we're not always getting to do what we do. So if we sat down, we did 2 great pieces, just the band directors, and we had a top-notch director conduct it. And then we are learning through their process, not just like reading through music, but how are they addressing this measure, or how are they addressing to get the group to play what they want to play? So we're watching a top-notch conductor while we're living inside the moment of creating music. And just
so we get to do that in Southwest Missouri. I play in the 4 State Winds, and that is basically what you're describing. It's like a community band, but it's not open to the community. So like you don't just get like, hey, I play trumpet, I want to play in the band. Like you have to be invited, or you have to reach out and kind of get placed that way. And then the conductor is Craig Fuchs from Pitt State, and he's fantastic, and the musicianship is really good, and most of the ensemble are music educators or students, music education students, and some community members, but they have to be good players. And so like I'm in the group because I'm obviously not a music educator or a music ed student, but I'm actually the president of the association, which I think they just did it because I have more flexibility and whatever, and I'm used to getting people together. And we sponsor the ensemble whenever the ensemble needs something. We always pay for it, and but that has been really useful because directors get to work on and play. I mean, we play tough music. We got to perform at MMA a few years ago, and we're playing like that kind of music. And right. Craig is such a great director to see how he breaks down and rehearses things. Now, it's a little different working with that level of musician. It's, you're not having to like work out sections. I mean, it does occasionally, there's occasionally some woodwind stuff that like, you got to kind of go through because sometimes they can't quite play it by themselves, but they certainly haven't had the repetition. And we only usually have 3 rehearsals and a performance. So it's kind of like, everything's pretty quick, but it makes it intense and fun because of it.
Right. I just think it would be nice to have that learning experience, especially you think the rural people who are rural, which that
you guys just need to take over a community band.
Well, I do a parent community bands, but it's geared towards people who quit bands in high school or didn't play after high school. So it's like normally the parents of my students, but again, we're not playing that level.
Interesting.
Oh, I love it. And so it's fun to see like 6th graders playing near adults, and the 6th graders lean over and help the adults because they haven't played in 30 years. And so I've done that, oh gosh, I would say 10 years. I started it at Francis Howell Middle School. And then when I came to Parkway, we did it the first 2 years. And then obviously this year we couldn't do it. But it's a definite community builder for sure.
Maybe it's just local, the way this area is set up, but there's the Missouri State Community Band that pretty much anyone can join, but it's a pretty darn good ensemble. They've also performed at MBA, and I think they're performing at MBA again. And then there are some others. If you get to some of the rural communities that maybe don't have quite the same quality of players across the board. Yeah. But that's a really great way to do it. But so tell me how this idea would work. A band director ensemble. It'd be hard to make it like a weekly thing, right? So you'd almost have to do it like maybe the way 4 State Winds works, where it's 3 rehearsals and a concert or something like that.
I was thinking one just at MMEA or MBA, one night, an hour, you sit in and you sit and rehearse. It's not for a performance. It's really solely to watch someone rehearse the band, learn through that, through what, like if we were going in someone's classroom and watching them, it would be learning through watching them rehearse us, which, in college, we had that opportunity, but I don't know about you. In college, I'm not sure I took advantage of that opportunity. Like, I think I was in the moment making music, worried about my part. I wasn't really noticing the nuances of how a director directs the band. So I think that when we come to the table now, we have just such a different thing that we're noticing and looking for and appreciating. So if you need to come
to MBA.
I haven't been, which is embarrassing.
Oh my gosh!
I know.
So come to MBA because they do that. They kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They do it as a reading session, but there's people from inside the ensemble are conducting the piece, and then there's a guest that's there that's then giving feedback on the conductor. So it's like a conducting clinic combined with a reading session.
Oh, I would like that.
And it's so much fun. And then, it's obviously it's at Tantera or Margaritaville, but it's during the summer. So you can actually get to do all the cool stuff that it's not frozen and snowing. And I mean, like my family goes, and I mean, we make like a whole, week out of it. It's a lot of fun. So, and MBA has gotten so good in the last, 6-7 years. It used to kind of be like, kind of whatever, just sort of a click and a hangout type thing. But now it is, I mean, I think if you're a band director, if I had to pick between that and MMEA, I'd probably go to MBA. Really? It's totally focused on what you do. So
I think the golfing makes me nervous.
Well, you don't have to golf, but you can.
It seems like
you don't have to be any good at it.
Like the golfing seems pretty major. Like that's like one of the headliners is like you can golf.
Oh, it's like the first day, or it's even like the pre-day. Like you can totally skip it. And so, how do you feel? How does playing in an ensemble? How does that help you as both a person, a musician, as an educator?
Well, I feel like everybody in the ensemble brings something to the table, whether, we have people that really love jazz. And so as I'm not really the jazziest horn player ever, so I get to hear their influences, and that makes me better in understanding some of the markings and things, and then that's better when I go back to my students in jazz band. Just the idea of blending, standing on the podium, I don't have to work to blend. So I expect my students to do it, but if I'm practicing that and in rehearsals doing that, then I can give them ideas. No, this is who we need to listen for. We need to listen for the moving notes, just as reminders about how we ourselves are making better. And quite honestly, I think it's awesome when students ask me if I still play. I can say yes. And so that they can see that it's a lifelong endeavor. It's not just through middle school or through high school. It's something that we can continue to do and enjoy and bring us enjoyment. So I think that that's one of the big things. Plus, it's just different. It's different than standing on the podium. And it does remind you there's great music out there and there's great musicians and you laugh. And sometimes on the podium, we forget to laugh. So we get so bogged down by everything we have to do. So
I think you're so right. I find for myself, like, even though obviously I'm rarely on a podium, but getting to play is so important for my mental well-being because, I had intended on being a band director, but then kind of went on a detour. But I always got into music retail because I liked to play. And I find myself, especially over periods of my career now that's spanned over 20 years, if I'm getting into periods where I'm not playing so much, then my enthusiasm for my career tends to kind of wane. Because I didn't get into this just to sell more flutes and guitars and stuff. Like, that's not really whatever got me excited about it. It was working with musicians and creating music makers and ultimately making music myself and being around all this cool stuff and getting to do that. And so when I go through periods like the last year where I haven't gotten to play that much, I can definitely feel it in my attitude and my feelings about my career, my life in general. So getting to play, you're right, it's such a strong reminder of why we do what we do.
Absolutely. And that just happened recently, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, sitting down with a quintet. We met for the first time and want to kind of got through the first song and there was like a collective, like it was so nice just to play music and be together with that. It was so, you just forget and you don't want to forget. So
yeah, I've been doing this thing, trying to get myself in shape to play for the Missouri Jazz Orchestra, and we're supposed to start next month. And so I have a little PA system up here in my music room, and I'll have that playing, and then I'll play the trumpet parts with the original recordings. And that's fun and enjoyable, but I know the first time that I get to sit in with the band and we play together, man, that first song is going to be like, like I can already just feel like getting excited for that feeling. And then the 4-state winds are supposed to pick up again this summer. And like, oh my gosh, so not only am I going to get to make wonderful wind ensemble music with my peers and friends, but I'm going to get to see some people that I haven't seen in over a year. And I just can't wait. I can't wait. It's going to be so great to get to do that. I'm totally with you. So, and the other idea that you had that you mentioned, which I think was a really great idea too, is the idea of doing little 20-minute sessions of kind of what's working for you at MMEA and at MBA. We could record them as like little podcast snippets and have people come in, and then you could also we could work with your districts to get you like presentation credits or something because you're doing this thing. I think that'd be a neat idea. So I'm gonna set something like that up. We've got MBA this summer, so it'll give me a good chance to kind of test it out, and certainly the whole recording system I have for this is mobile, so it'd be an easy thing to do.
Great stuff. Just going in and listening to the podcasts you've done. I haven't made it through all of them, but the ones I'm like, that's a good idea. And I'm taking notes on the side. So many of us are singletons. We're the only person in our building doing what we do, and we don't get the opportunities to go out and see other things. So even something so simple as how someone organizes the beginning of their rehearsal or how they do inventory or just little things like that, like this really works for me. And that can open our eyes to possibilities, or we could go, well, that portion works, so maybe I can try this or adapt this to what I already do. I think that it would be nice. There's such a collective. I think, for this pandemic and being virtual, so many people have been willing to share what they do through Facebook pages. And, you know, it's like a menu, like I'll take this and I can do this, I'll skip this. But it has been an amazing collective resource of ideas and inspiration that I think we can carry on in the future. If anything has had an impact, I think that just so many amazing ideas and effort and things that I would not have thought of or known about had this not happened. So
Yeah.
there's
There's certainly an attitude of sharing, I think, that is that everyone's really keen on right now. And there's such a huge resource with all the directors and educators in our state, and everyone is doing something we can learn from. You know, everyone has some piece that
the veterans. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's either got a challenge or has solved something or has a thought. And, you know, sometimes most ideas that have been shared thus far are things that we would want to emulate, but sometimes it's helpful to also know the things you wouldn't want to emulate. And I don't know, I just think there's a lot to learn. And so far, you're right. The guests have all just been awesome. And, you know, I find myself with this notebook of ideas. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Like, I'm not a band director, but I still write. They're just too good. I can't help it. Like, I'll write it. Maybe I'll publish a little book or something one day of everyone's greatest ideas. But anyway, so one of the things that that we were going to talk about today, and it's something that Lisa McMahon mentioned, because Lisa is the one that kind of connected you and I. She mentioned that you do a variety of kind of creative student projects that she thought were just really, really smart. And when I was asking you for some more details, you're kind of explaining that you've got this Battle of the Bands thing that you do for small ensembles. You do a variety of different composition projects for students. You do a student conducting thing. So kind of maybe whatever order makes the most sense, get me started on what some of the additional content things you're doing with your students.
I think the one that I feel most passionate about is going to be the composing. Anytime I do anything where the kids don't have the instruments on their face necessarily, or I'm not standing on the podium in a traditional setting, I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, the students are getting something out of it. It always has a purpose behind the activity. And I'll talk about conducting because we just did that this week. I had one year where we made it through our winter concert, and I was talking to the band. We were just assessing how it went, and there was a tempo issue, and I talked about, you know, guys, this is always one. And it was a sixth grader, and he goes, "Oh, is that what that means?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh," you know, I waved my arms like crazy up here, and I've never officially taught the kids what it all means. I just go on my merry way, making the pattern and thinking everything is good. So at that point in time, I thought, well, let's teach them how to conduct and get them in front of their band and conduct simple songs so that they understand what it's like from my side. They understand what the motions mean. Same thing with composing. It does take time out of the rehearsal, and I really am not usually going to do something that doesn't pay off. So if I'm going to spend 3 portions of a class or more having the students compose, what is my goal and what am I going to get out of it? And what I have learned is when the students are working on these compositions, it actually starts conversations that don't start in a rehearsal. We're very protective. We have our instrument, we have our stand. I stand on the front and I tell the students what I want them to do. There's not a lot of creativity that goes behind creating music. It's really the director. In a lot of cases, the director is telling the bands, no, that needs to be louder, that needs to be softer, those notes need to be shorter, and the students have to emulate that. And it's also really interesting on what a student can get through a rehearsal with not really even knowing that much. They just copy what everybody else does around them. And that really came to light when I did one of my first compositions, and I said, okay, now you guys need to go in and add dynamics. And I had an 8th grader go, what are dynamics? I'm like, okay, I know I've taught this. I know we've done this, but it's just something that if they hear people play loud, okay, they play louder. Okay, now we play soft. Okay, I'll play softer. But they don't necessarily really deeply understand what they need to do. So the composition definitely improved vocabulary and conversations. It gets the kids in and manipulating the sounds and understanding what notes match and what notes don't match. And I find that the students learn in a deeper way by going in there, and it's hands-on constructing melodies. I also learned very quickly when I first did this that you got some pretty crummy melodies if you didn't do some front loading before you had the kids create the melodies. So I start in 6th grade having students, we look at steps, we look at thirds, we talk about intervals, so that when we go into the composition, it's things that the kids can go in and look for. So there is a process behind the madness that has developed over time. It probably started when I first did one. It was, okay, we had the concert, we have 2 weeks till the end of school. What are we going to do? And
Right.
we would try composing. And the process of what I have learned in my teaching and what I have changed to make sure the kids understand to be able to compose has been amazing. It's eye-opening. So like one of the things I do is a melodic composition. And the melodic composition, we go in and we do what makes a good melody. And I probably change it a little bit every year and grow from it. There's a project I want to add to it this summer. I'll talk about in a second. But the kids create melodies, and it's 8-measure melodies. And we talk about the key signatures, and we talk about what the first note and the last note should be. And if they disagree, they have to support to me why it's not going to be the scale degree 1 of the scale that they're using. Tell me why. It's almost always 4 or 5 that they pick. So let's talk about how that's okay or not okay. But we move along, and then we take those melodies and we give them to a composer who then listens to all the melodies, and they choose 1 or 2, and I've had 3 melodies from the students' compositions, and then we commission a piece of music to be written based on the student melodies that the 8th grade band premieres in the spring. So
Holy cow.
There's a few levels to it, and I've done that for 3 years. This will be my 4th year to do that. But I mean, the students just, even if it's not theirs, they know someone that got selected. And It's been crazy how it's worked out. Last year, it was actually Matt McKeever was our composer, and it was a 6th grader, a 7th grader, and an 8th grader all got selected. And he doesn't know anything other than here's the melodies. And he goes through and see what inspires him. And we have conversations about that. On a different day, different pieces might get chosen. It's just how it works. And on that particular day, your particular melody sparked something in that composer. Yeah. So that's one of them that I love that one.
It may not even be that those melodies were better. That maybe those 3 kind of worked together or inspired him or whatever.
That is what happened, that the 3 got introduced and then they got layered on top of each other at the end. He's got it on his website. It's called Patriot Rhythms. So it's a really cool piece.
So tell me, what is, like, you don't have to tell me exactly how much he charged, but on average, if you're having something like this commissioned, what would one pay for that?
So I have paid anywhere between $350 and $2,000. My first year, I was at a different school, and we rocked cookie dough sales like nothing. I mean, it was pretty good. And so I did have Randall Standridge did it the first year for me. And then I had Gary Gackstetter and then Matt McKeever, since I've been at this school where we don't do fundraisers. So you're a little bit more reliant on other areas that might not have that cookie dough sales. But it was great. Gary Gackstetter was able to come to the concert, and then the students who he used their melodies, he got to talk to them, and he signed I bind the score for the kids who it's their melodies, and then he signed it for them. So it's a fun process.
Cool. Yeah.
It's something that I will continue to do each year as long as the funds are there, for sure.
So when do you tend to do that? Like what time of year?
So, like I said, especially with sixth graders, because I have sixth, seventh, and eighth all do this. There's a lot of front loading that goes into how are these melodies made up. Again, key signatures become really important. Scale degrees, I do a lot with the first, second, just scale degrees when we're doing scales, so that we can have conversations about that. I normally start. First, we get signed up on Noteflight. That's the one that I use because it's now very familiar to me. I can't say it's necessarily, there's every program's going to have issues. This is just the one that I'm comfortable with right now. And so I have a day where the students don't bring their instruments. They always love that. And so they don't bring their instruments, and we get signed up for Noteflight usually in about October. And then we spend a day where they just get to play around and explore the site because they're way more adventurous than I am when it comes to things like that. So they have taught me things, or I get stuck and someone in the class will go, oh, you just have to do this. Okay. So we explore and then we start digging in. And so normally we finish by December. So I'll give portions of days or entire days, probably 3 or 4 between then and December. A lot of it can happen after you have that winter concert. You usually have a week left, and that's when we go in and do some final editing. So it's just something we gradually work on throughout that time.
Got it. I love this. That's such a great idea. How clever.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. I can see why Lisa was so excited about this stuff that you're doing. That's really cool. All right. And I'm, again, making notes for this because this is so good.
I have another one.
Tell me the next one.
Okay, I do a collaboration with the art teacher, and this one so far I've only done with the 8th graders, but the art teacher has her students create drawings based on words, and the drawing is a 2-dimensional representation of the word. So let's say you have the word hungry. They write the word hungry in a style so it might have a bite out of it. Or if the word's whisper, they would have very light ink and write the word whisper in the bottom corner. So they write the word being represented in the font, in the style, in the boldness. And then my students get the word and they write a piece of music based on that word. So we talk about how tempo affects a mood. We talk about range and tessitura and timbre and all of this stuff, so that they understand their role in telling a story to the audience, not just by this art word, but when we are looking at concert music, how do dynamics impact the emotion that's being given? How does the articulation or the style or the dynamic impact the story that we're telling? So this one has very few rules as far as what the students are allowed. They can use any instrument that's in Noteflight. They can play around with tempos. They can change the tempo, which in the melody one they're not allowed to do. So they really have a free-for-all in this one, and they love that because I don't think that happens very often when you're an 8th grade middle school student, that you don't really have any rules.
Right.
So that one is a pretty fun time. And in the past, we would turn those melodies into a QR code and we would attach them to the mat of the artwork, and you could go by and QR code it. Normally we have a fine arts festival, and that's where they all get displayed in February. That obviously didn't happen this year. So it changed how we presented it, and there's a video, and on background of the artwork is the music playing, which I actually have pulled up if you want to.
Yeah, totally.
So these are examples of one. This student the word was broken, and so it sounds like this. And then we have grim. Scary's one. So again, talking about dynamics and voicing and things like that.
That is clever. Okay, and then you have another one that's like a rhythmic composition. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So, oh look, I suddenly have glasses on. Yeah, the rhythm composition. I decided to try something new, and that one just came out this year. Although I've done rhythm compositions before. The rhythm composition this year I used when I introduced new rhythms. So, like seventh graders, when I introduced the 16th notes, I decided to have them go in and manipulate the 16th notes, and then perform them using just stuff they found around the house. So I had one kid who is avid hockey player, and he actually did the whole thing using using a hockey stick and a practice ball, and did all the notes and the rhythms using that. And he would slide and then da 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 and slide. So trying to get them to again write in smart music, physically putting in the rhythms. And then it had a catch to it that actually worked out really well. Once they wrote the rhythms in, sorry, I said smart music, but Note Flight. Once they did that, they could go in and use that as a resource for practicing the rhythms that they created. So they just go in and play, and then they could sit and clap the rhythms along with what they composed. So that kind of had a twofold bonus to it, where they're creating it and then they can go in and practice it the right way without me standing over them, or even having us all do the same one. And then you can pop it up on the board and you go, hey, everybody, this is Joe's rhythm. Let's clap that. And then Joe gets to hear everybody clapping his rhythm, or Susie clapping their rhythm. So that's kind of been fun to go in, and they're not worried about the mechanics of everything or the articulation. We can move into that, but let's first see, do you really understand the rhythm that we're using? Now, in hindsight, Note Flight helps a lot. Like, Note Flight helps because it will help show you that, okay, you don't have enough beats in this measure. That's why everything just turned into a rest. So if they handwrite it, which then takes away some of the bonuses, if they handwrite it first, then you can see, do they really understand this, or is Note Flight helping them out a whole big bunch? But if they write it and then you approve it, and then they can plug that into Note Flight, that can be helpful too. I think that's one change that I'll make next time, is really show me that you understand how these rhythms fit together, and then we'll go in and plug it into Note Flight.
Yeah. So as you've done these various student compositions, tell me, how has that changed your ensembles or the student participation in your ensembles? Like, as you've done these, what have you noticed that had the benefits have been?
I feel like it hits more points with students, giving them an opportunity to be creative. The students that struggle with playing can still create something, a quality product by their composition, and be proud of it, even though they might still be struggling, sixth graders struggling to produce a fantastic tone, which might be something that happens later on in seventh or eighth grade, hopefully. But they are able to give something and show something that they can be proud of, that they created. And that brings in ownership to what they're doing. I had one student that I was very concerned when coming back from virtual, very concerned that this student was going to make it. Lots of, what note is that? What note is that? And we did the first day of going in and just messing around on Note Flight. And the student came back the next weekend and had figured out different video game themes. And I'm not talking just a melody. I am talking like instrumentation, rhythms beyond rhythms that we would ever see in sixth, seventh, or eighth grade. Just all of a sudden, this strength that this student had showed up, and now the student's like, I'll be in band all 3 years. And as of the first day, I'm like, this kid's not going to make it.
Right.
So even just one kid, I mean, there's days where you're just hoping that you help one kid find the connection. And I've seen multiple kids, but I can also go, we're going to sight read. When we sight read, everybody look for the scale the steps. Everybody look for the thirds. Look for something bigger than a third. Is there a leap bigger than a third? And because I teach the melodies to the kids in a different way now, it has made them stronger at looking at rhythms and melodies in other things that we do.
Yeah. It's
I just love it.
I could see how, like, the traditional way we do it, we pick up our instrument, we play the music in front of us, and we do that every day unless our teacher's sick, and then we watch a video. But that's basically the day. Like,
now you can compose.
Right. But now I could see, like, doing this allows you to get them to have a deeper understanding of music, where they're kind of coming at it from like another perspective. So if this is the straight line approach of like, we're playing our instrument, learning music this way, by doing these various composition type projects, we're kind of like getting different cross sections and seeing it another way, where it's helping us to maybe internalize it better. And we can't just use rote, because I know every director has they know there's some kids that are just looking at the kid next to them to figure out where does my slide go, and I'm just going to sit here and act like I'm playing and not really play. And so they're kind of getting through it, but this, engages their brain, and they have to show that they're participating, and it might increase their knowledge of it.
I think of it as a little bit of Thanksgiving dinner, if this relates. But and growing up, my mom did everything at Thanksgiving. She grocery shopped, she prepared, she made the meals. We would sit down, and in 15 minutes, all of that hard work was done, consumed. Thanks, Mom, and we go on our merry way. And then there was a year that I hosted Thanksgiving, and I shopped and prepared and created all of the meals. And I'll tell you what, Thanksgiving dinner tasted different. Yeah. Because I had put that work. I understood what went into it. I understood there's choices that you get to make along the way, and there's a reason why composers put notes in certain places. Like, why do these two notes not get along? What does that create? So when it came to actually the year I actually created my Thanksgiving dinner, now it's a whole different experience for me. And I can't wait till my own kids do the same thing, because it's different when we are involved in the process of things.
Yeah.
So I always think of it that way. That if we can understand by manipulating it, we can understand better when we're playing it.
That's totally true.
Anytime not on the podium there needs to be a payoff. So that's like, what is my goal? And I did start out, I think I made this mistake. I started out, when I first started teaching composing, I started with, here's chord progressions. Let's talk about non-chord tones. Let's talk about this, and here's this rule, and this rule, and this rule. And then I would get good compositions, but they were all kind of the same. And I remembered something when my daughter went to kindergarten. She came home one day and she said, I can't do any more purple trees. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do purple trees? And she said, my teacher said every tree is brown and then green leaves, and I can't do any more purple trees. I'm like, you can do purple trees at my house. We're purple trees. But then after I did the composition and I kind of got them all the same, I'm like, oh, there's no purple trees. I did not let them do purple trees. I need to give them this opportunity to break a rule. And so then we started breaking rules. And I had a student one time go, it's a lot more fun when we don't know the rules. I'm like, yes, sometimes it is. So yeah. it give them that opportunity. Again, being creative. I don't know if we give them enough opportunities to do that, not just in our classrooms, but just outside of our classroom. There's a lot of rules to follow. So that's how we learn and moving to be that next level.
Well, and then you also created a website, Listen to Learn, listen with the number 2, listen to number 2, learn, which allows students can create pieces. And kind of tell me a little bit about how the site works, why you created it, and how you use it.
So I created that with the idea that I wanted to have top musicians with top musical pieces more prevalent in my classroom. I was not playing a lot of these standard pieces that are so good. And again, like we talked about, pieces that hit us at the heart of why we love what we do. And I wasn't playing a lot of that in my own classroom. So I thought of it that it could possibly be a teaching tool for my classroom. So I went in and I looked at some top quality programs and looked at some pieces that they were doing in their own concert programming. And I started studying those pieces and I took the scores. And then I went in and thought of what are some vocabulary words that I want my students to know, what's in my curriculum, what are things that are important. And then I went in and clipped videos, YouTube videos of those sections. So if something was staccato, I clipped a section that showed highlighted staccato using like blue shades, using a Granger piece, and what actually showed the staccato moment so that kids could hear professional musicians playing legato and staccato and allegro and doing a crescendo and being forte and all of those things. So if you go on the site, you can click on a word and click on pieces that in the score it says staccato, or in the score it says legato, and this is the section and this is the interpretation of this group playing that. It has grown into a few other things. There's a place for ideas, and the ideas, just different things that teachers can do. And quite honestly, just having a resource of the full recordings. So I have the full recordings, and I just go in and I have a kid in the morning go, hey, pick a number 1 through 30. I count. I play, that's the song I play as they're coming in, because now they come in earlier because they can't hang out in the hallways. That's what I play when we're switching classes. So I have music and it's just right there. I have places where it highlights, the alto saxophone. So I can say this is what an alto saxophone sounds like. And it's an alto solo from wind band literature, so that students can hear the tone quality of not just a jazz trumpet, but also a legato piano trumpet.
Yeah.
So it has things in there. And then I have discovered Google Slides right now. Like, I'm all in Google Slides. So I've gone in and I've created some Google Slides using some of those clips, whether it's articulation or I just did a conducting one. So kids can, it could be asynchronous and kids can learn how to conduct, and it uses some of those clips from some of the pieces talking about time signatures. So there's 3/4 4/4/4, and then there's some funny ones where you have to guess what the time signature is. So it was. I keep saying so. I need to stop saying so. So
No, you're fine. The thing that I've learned from doing this is we all have these filler words that we say that we're completely unaware of, and they don't even bother you when you're having a normal conversation. You're completely unaware of it. But then if you're listening to like a podcast, or certainly when you're editing the podcast, you hear, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how many times this person says so, or or and is far and away the most popular one.
We can keep a little tally down at the bottom how many times.
Yeah.
I did, when we were virtual, I did what was called SMS, South Middle School Bands Together. And I went in gung-ho, but man, it was exhausting. And I went in and interviewed, I had the kids learn about musicians, and then we would go in and the kids asked the questions, and that's what I would use to interview. And I got to Dr. Parisi over in Kansas City, and I was in the video. Thank goodness I learned how to use WeVideo better, because I would go in and clip out the word, I have something in my eye, clip out the word awesome. Like, oh my gosh, every time he said anything, I would go, awesome. Like, oh. So I go in and clip out the little word awesome, like, probably 20 times. I thought,
oh my gosh.
I got to stop doing that one.
You know, having done this, because I have a business podcast that I've had for maybe a year and a half, which is kind of how I got the experience and knowledge of doing this. And then obviously this just started within the last few months. But because of that, and it's not just doing the interviews, but when I do an interview, I have to go back and I have to edit the audio podcast, which means I have to listen to the whole thing and then make cuts, and then sometimes move sections, delete sections. And then when all that's done, I have to go back and do the same thing for video. But video is generally simpler because when people can see your face, the and-ums don't bother them as much, has been my experience. So if we watch a YouTube video, we're more forgiving
because we can see your facial expressions, all that kind of stuff. But if you're just listening, it's not. And so to edit out like an hour-long episode takes 3 or 4 hours at least to do. So you have the experience of doing it, and then you have the experience of editing it, and then of course it's published and people listen. And so you do that 40 or 50 times, and then you start listening to other podcasts and other interviews that are done by amateurs like myself. And you definitely pick up on the ones that are good, but there's way more that I feel like are bad, and I'll listen to something like I'm a trumpet player, as I've probably mentioned too many times, but there's a guy who does a trumpet podcast, and he has world-class guests. I mean, just the best of the best are on this podcast. He is such a terrible interviewer. He's terrible. And like, I don't know who he is. I think he's a nobody for all I can tell. But he's always expressing his opinion all the time. And there's so many times where it's very clear when his guest is speaking, it's clear like he's not really even paying attention to their answer. And that when they were done, he's like, cool. So, and then he'll ask some question that's nothing related to it. You're just like, oh, this is, if you didn't have Wayne Bergeron on your podcast, I wouldn't be listening to this right now, But anyway, obviously I'm going to cut all that part out. But
Okay. That's okay. No, you're funny.
I love that you went to I have to check out the website, and I encourage everyone else to as well. Listen to learn. That just sounds really creative, and I look forward to checking that out. Okay. The other idea I wanted to hear about was this battle of the bands for small ensembles. So that's literally all I know about it. You just kind of gave me that headline, and I was like, well, that sounds cool. Like, I know what a battle of the bands is, but tell me how that thing works.
It started from, I love professional development. Like, if I could professional development, I would. I love going in and listening to other ideas. And Andy Beserly, when I was over in Francis Howell, we just had the band directors in a room, and he was talking about small ensemble stuff at the high school level. And I thought, sure, I'll try it. So I did not have a lot of literature. So I found online, there's Aaron Cole. I think it's aaroncole.com, and it's 2 A's. He has a thing called 36 chorales that cover a lot of different ability levels. And so I would go in, and they're free. I would go in and select about 10 of them. The kids would do their own groups. And then it's written as SATB. So as long as you have 4 people and you're covering the 4 parts, and we would take days and separate. And sometimes you have 4 groups in one room. You might have a couple in the hall. Make sure your neighbors like you. Couple in like a locker room, and you just walk around. Sometimes you had to plan a little bit of what group goes with what group. But the kids would run their own sectionals. They would run their own rehearsal, and you would walk through and you hear them talking. And I did it with 7th and 8th graders. You would hear them talking about how to breathe to come in together. You hear them talking about phrases. You hear them talking about, we need to hear more of this part. And they were putting to use all the stuff that I stand up and hope that they're picking up on. And you could see it actually happening. Then we would take several times, we would have like a big March Madness grid. They would come up with their own names of their groups. I print out what the barking frogs, and they would have their names. I did it where each group competed on both sides of the grid, of the bracket, so that they were going against a different team, and they had to at least play twice. So if they were on the left side, and then they were also on the right side going against somebody else, and then we would advance and we would advance. Everyone would get graded on the first round because everyone had to play on the first round, and then we go forward. And I've had it where I've had guests come in and be the judge, even if it's just like the counselor or the principal would come in. If it's the principal, then they get to see what you're doing in your class. I phoned a friend, like, hey, can you listen to this? There's one where I always record them, just on the side, I record it. And one, I said, I can't make the decision. And so I sent it out to a couple band directors, and they sent it back. And the kids were like, did they listen? Did they, they're always so into it. And so then the other band directors make the decision because I couldn't. And, we talk about the criteria. Are you in tune? Are you matching style? And so it gets them to approach, hopefully, in small ensemble stuff that I want them to approach in big ensemble. So then it carries over into that. And then big celebrations. One year when I did it, we tied it into a big festival that the seventh grade was doing, and that's where they had their final. They performed in front of the entire seventh grade, and then we had a teacher panel that voted on which one would be the winning ensemble. So you can do it as big as you want or as little as you want. Watching the kids actually be in a position where they run their own mini rehearsal, very impactful to you as a teacher and to them as students.
I could totally see that. I mean, we all have experienced the reality that you learn something better when you try to teach it. Like we've all seen that. And certainly when students start to try to run their own rehearsal, practice their own thing, they understand why it's important that people should be not talking when we're not supposed to be talking, and paying attention to our key signatures. And now we got to go back and do this all over again, and being prepared. Like it really
has to be removed. Like my group is not functioning. Can I be removed from that group and join another? I'm like, I mean, they at least that's where they realize. And there's sometimes kids that are the ones that cause problems in the rehearsal. So, I'm like, why would you want to be removed? What is it that they're doing? Again, starting those conversations so that we can learn together.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. This year has been trickier for that. Just obviously everything has been trickier.
Yeah.
But having them, that's one I look forward to reinstituting next year.
Yeah, no kidding. I can see that being really, and I love the idea of kind of tying that together with like a March Madness bracket. Like that's so clever where they advance through. My friend Lewis Morgan, who's a band director in Pittsburgh Baxter Springs, Kansas. He did something. He's big on TikTok. He's hysterical on TikTok, and hysterical and somehow thought provoking. His TikTok channel is like two different things.
Level. Yeah.
Yes. He'll do one thing that's all about just funny band director things. It's hysterical. And then he on the same channel, let's talk about systemic racism. You're like, okay, here we go. And he's just really smart. But anyway, one of the things that he's done this spring has been a March Madness, but for pep band tunes. And so they're pitting like their pep band tunes against each other to come up with like which one's the favorite and the best. And it's fun, and let's have poll, and you can see like who's winning, and I don't know, it's just kind of fun to do it. But I could totally see doing this with a battle of the small ensembles type of thing. Like, man, that's awesome. That's such a great idea.
It also teaches kids how to be an audience. So while the other group is performing, we do talk about audience etiquette. And so that is another thing that, again, trying to squeeze as much as you can in that learning process. Like, how do we listen? How do we applaud? How do we recognize there's a lot of levels to it. We did the military March Madness, the Marine Band one this year for the first time because we had 85-minute classes, which for beginners is yeah. So we got to do that. Man, they buy into that. They would come in like, which one won? And they were so upset when, I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but they were so upset when the Don Williams piece that everyone thought was going to win didn't win. There was anarchy. I mean, they were buying in, and you're listening to these top quality groups and these kids. I don't think I had one moment where I had to ask them to pay attention. Like they loved it. Why did I not do this before? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Hindsight.
I could totally see how these kind of things could really not only reach the kids that may not be getting reached to through the playing of their instrument solely, but even a kid like me who I loved playing my instrument. I was never the kid that would come in and be like, do we have to have our instruments today? Like, I never asked that. I always wanted to play. But I would totally enjoy an activity like this, like any of these, really. Like I would have enjoyed the challenge of trying to compose something and try to create something. I would definitely enjoy the chance to, work up a piece to perform. And I think playing in those small chamber ensembles are so important for musicians to learn skills, that whole one to a part type thing. And if it's to be, it's up to me. Like, this part will not be heard if I don't play it. And there's a whole new level of nerves that you can encounter doing that. And playing in a chamber ensemble is a great kind of way to get yourself ready for playing solos. And but most of the times we take kids who are like, all right, you're the seventh trumpet out of 30, and this is all you've done is play in band. Boom, here's a solo. Go play a solo. And then of course the kid's like, super nervous. And
Right.
yeah, I always struggled with nerves. I mean, all the way through college. It finally got to the point where I just would have to think like, well, I'm not playing to impress anybody. I'm just going to play for my enjoyment. Because I remember I had won a concerto aria competition where I got to perform a solo with University Orchestra. And I remember being so upset that I won. Because I thought, oh my God, now I have to like perform in front of an audience standing in front of the orchestra. Like, I was terrified. Like, the idea of doing it terrified me. And I honestly, the only way I got through that was beta blockers. I had someone that would send me, he lived in Mexico, and he'd send me beta blockers, and I had never taken one, and I took one the day of the performance. And fortunately it went well, but I was so petrified I would have done almost anything because
That's how I got my master's of performance, was with the beta blocker.
Did it? Yeah.
My nerves just got worse and worse. And still to this day, like, I get so much anxiety over the idea of playing anything solo, or if there even is a solo in a brass quartet. Oh my, I will sit 10 measures before, and I can feel the heat, and I'm still playing, but I can feel the heat rise. I feel like that is something, that human part of it is something I can bring back to my students, because we are human, and again, we're not going to be perfect. So being able to talk to students who are about to take their first playing test as a sixth grade, I'm like, I get it. Here's what I do. Breathe through it, and that is a constant reminder to me. Like, these kids, we're like, play 72. And
Yes.
you can see it. And so what other opportunities can I give a student to assess them that doesn't put them in front of their class? Here's your moment, go.
Yeah.
Because some kids aren't going to do well with that. Although they can play great when the whole band's playing, they might not take a traditional playing test like we probably grew up doing, the same way that they could if they're videoing it at home, or recording themselves, outside for a minute, or in the hallway for a minute. So there is definitely an advantage to not being perfect. We become more human and understand our students just a little bit better.
Well, and I think, I mean, again, so I think easing them into it is such a great idea. But then you're right. I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable to admit that you can struggle with performance anxiety is such an important piece. I know for myself, I didn't feel comfortable sharing that for a long time. And then I remember, honestly, this was only a few years ago. I think, if I remember this right, we were going to Midwest, and we were taking a bunch of directors to Midwest. And I was having a conversation with Trey Waddell, who teaches down at Carl Junction, which is in the southwest corner of the state, and another good trumpet player. And he and I play in the 4-state winds together. And Trey's been the principal player for the last, I don't know, couple of years, whatever. And I remember finally just telling him, like, sharing with him that, like, when I play, I enjoy playing, but honestly, like, I want other people to, like, be impressed with my playing, like, I don't have to be better than everyone, but I would like to be, but when I play, I just want people to go, oh, he's a good player. And I really think that screws with my head. And he quickly admitted the exact same thing. He's like, I feel the exact same way. And then it got me thinking, like, okay, so this is something we all feel with. And then shortly after that, I was going to play with Missouri Jazz Orchestra, and I have been a sub for years, and just now officially joined the group as a permanent member. And when I would have to go play with them, I would be so nervous, Not nervous if I knew I was playing like fourth trumpet or something, but I usually have to play the split lead book, and I would get like almost not. One night I remember getting like physically ill because I was so nervous about it, and it finally dawned on me to like these guys are having me come in because they like me and they like my playing, and it's such a cool group. They don't care if I miss a note. They don't even care if I'm having a bad night. They like me and they like the way I make music. So I need to cut myself some slack and I don't need to try to impress them. Like that's not what it's about.
Well, and that'll tie into teaching as well. Is we always think we have to have the top program or the program that performs it at MMEA, but there's more to what we do than that aspect of it. Obviously, we all want great kids sitting in front of us who play great music. We want that, but I teach middle school. I want kids to love what they're doing, and if I'm sitting there and just drilling, that might not create a love in the majority of the students that I have. So what can I do? What can I approach them with, and moments that I can create for them that will get them to want to stay long
Yeah.
enough where we have that intrinsic love for music, because a seventh grader is not necessarily going to have that. It's,
Right.
no matter what I do, there's probably a level of intrinsic that's not going to happen. So getting them to at least love what they're doing and not feel like they have to be the best. I don't want my bottom 8 flutes dropping because they're not first chair. So
Right.
what can I do that keeps them in long enough that they can continue to love and grow and not beat themselves up through music? So
Yeah.
we are caught in that dilemma all the time as at the level that as professional musicians, and it's overwhelming. Sometimes you just got to sit back and love what you do.
Yeah. If I was smart, I would end the episode right there, but I'm not. I'm going to say something else. So, I think hopefully with this approach you're taking too, it'll help build a lifelong love, not just of music, but of making music. Because I think one of the things in my career that I've been the most perplexed and saddened by is the number of kids or a number of people who play through school, middle school or high school, and then quit to never play again. And they never touched their instrument again. They spent those 6 or 7 years learning that skill, and then once it was done, just didn't want to pursue it anymore after that.
I think that ties in though with what we were just talking about of we expect ourselves to play at a certain level. That's we're professional musicians, we expect ourselves to do that. So you have a group of people who stopped playing at the end of high school or sometimes the end of middle school. What ensemble do they have? They're going to be intimidated to probably join a top quality community band. They're going to be intimidated to start their own brass quintet. So what outlets do they have? And that's where earlier when we were talking about 10 years ago starting the community band that caters to people who did stop, that haven't played their instrument in 20 years, but they just want to make music. Let's make music again. And they always walk in with trepidation. There's always like, I can't believe my kid talked me into this. I don't know what I'm doing here. And they always leave smiling, happy, and almost always come back. There's been a couple cases where they felt just very overwhelmed. But having a community band of parents and faculty and students that gears towards playing middle school level music and seeing these kids and adults next to each other and adults laughing. Past 2 years, I had a parent who would come in after school to practice the mallet parts. And she even came into parent conferences and said, I'm not here for my child. I was wondering if you could answer this question. And she's asking me a key signature accidental question. But it gets them back into the love, and then these kids see that and like my parent is still playing an instrument or took up something that they hadn't done in a long time and putting themselves out there, and that shows the kids that lifelong learners and being music makers forever. it's there. It's possible, but I think that a lot of people think, well, I quit in high school and I shall never do it again. And that
Right.
doesn't have to be the option. There are other options.
Yeah. So how did those community ensembles get started, and how do they operate? Kind of talk me through that.
So I started mine about 10 years ago at a different school, and I'm sure I was at a professional development, or I was asked. Oh, it was through some 4 questions that were being asked about character education, and one of the questions was, how do we involve parents in our programs? And other than chaperoning a field trip, I didn't, and so I thought, how can I? And there's so many people that stopped, they just stopped playing when they left high school or middle school. And I thought, maybe I can invite them back in. And the way I have always done it, and the parents, I always ask the parents, would you like to try this? And they're like, nope, we're good. So I usually block out February, and I do 4 rehearsals, sometimes 5, depends how the days fall. And we do 4 evening rehearsals for 2 hours. They come to the middle school. And then the first Friday night of March, or the very last Friday night of February, we kind of kick off Music in Our Schools month by having a community-based concert. It's quick. It is, I mean, we probably only know 4 or 5 songs. And so it is a quick concert. And then we have community afterwards, where everybody brings in something to eat, cookies and snacks and punch, and a 15-minute concert has a 30-minute everybody enjoying each other and talking about, things that they've done when they played last. And it's a fun place to be. And we're not worried about how is that going to sound at festival. We are just making music together. So the kids
Do
get to
they
see.
do
Go
they
ahead.
have to have played before? So are these parents
I
that played
do.
before?
I do put in, they have to grade themselves on a level of 1, I don't remember how to put my instrument together, to 10. I'm ready to go for the St. Louis Symphony, which ironically I had a dad who played for the St. Louis Symphony. And I had always had that on there before. And then the one kid, I passed it out and he's like, my dad can circle that one. Awesome, do it. So I kind of get an idea. I try to make it as comfortable as possible. I had one mom one time, she would only play her flute and the measures she liked, and then she would put her flute down, and that's fine. If you just want to play whole notes, that's fine. I try to pick pieces that are really a 0.5 to a 2.5 in some cases. You have professional musicians that have sat in, and that always brings up the level of the people around you. So the selection of music is always something that is very important in that. Sometimes I use pieces that the 7th graders have played before and they get excited, like, I remember this one. So at least I have that base that they already know how to play it. So then the parents can hear that. But there's such a variation in it, just trying to create a place where that's okay. That's okay. And
Yeah.
it's a community to build that we aren't going to be perfect. It's not, but what can we do to create music?
Well, they have to have their own instrument, right?
Yes, there have been
So,
some cases where I have had some extras to loan. I've also had where music stores have let them rent for a month and
mhm.
then be able to return it just after a 1 month. So I have had situations. I've had parents go out and buy one. It's variations in that as well. But yes, they do usually have to have something that they can carry into the band room to play.
I'd love to get something like that started, but then find a way to keep it going. You know?
Sometimes I wish I did it also in the summer, but I do find that I need just a smidgen of downtime. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe when my daughters are out of high school and I'm not driving everywhere to take my daughter to hockey, that might change, might be able. But I also find parents are just busy. I'm busy because I have a high schooler, 2 high schoolers. Other parents are busy too, and so if you overwhelm them with the commitment that it's going to take, then I feel like they don't do it. But they usually can commit to 4 rehearsals.
Yeah.
I can do 4 nights.
That's the way the four state wins works. Where Craig will reach out to us and say, "Here's the literature, here's the rehearsal dates, here's the concert date, here's the locations. Let me know if you can commit to these dates, and then if you commit to the dates, the expectation is you're there, or if you're going to have to miss a date, that's communicated before then." And even though it's a volunteer ensemble, I mean, the expectation is if you said you're going to be there, you're going to be there. Now, I mean, if something truly urgent comes up, like, I mean, he gets it, like, we're all adults here and stuff. But I know for myself, like, I definitely feel committed. And there's times where there's things that come up in the business. I'm like, oh, shoot, like, I should do that. Like, no, I've got 4 state wins. Like, someone else needs to handle this. They can handle this because I've got a commitment to the ensemble to be there. And yeah, I love doing that. So yeah, you probably could. And I think in some areas, it wouldn't have to be the same director. You could say like, hey, I'll do the spring one, and then this director at this other district or at this other building, she'll do the summer one, and then we'll do a fall one, and the high school guy will do that or whatever. And that way, you're right. It would allow you to, because you do directors don't have enough downtime for sure. So you need it when you can get it. I love that idea. That's so good.